Welcome to Be With the Cultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. In this episode, I'm going to go over The Adventures of Tom Bombadil by J.R.R. Tolkien. But before I begin, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, and click the bell for notifications if you want to receive notices when I put out new content. Now, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil by J.R.R. Tolkien. This edition is by HarperCollins from 2014. Now, it will be difficult for me to do a review of this book without some spoilers, so I usually try to be spoiler-free, but the truth is, in this particular book, it will be difficult because for me to comment on what makes Tom Bombadil special, it requires me to give a few spoiling comments. Now, I don't think they will necessarily reveal much about the narrative of this book at all, because I am simply speaking on the nature of the character and what it could theoretically represent. So it doesn't really spoil any plot lines or anything within the two covers, but it is more commentary in general. So hopefully it's not much of a spoiler. Now, as a backdrop, Tom Bombadil is a very interesting but strange character in Lord of the Rings, because within that universe, he doesn't really occupy a very crucial space in the narrative. He appears in a particular part of the story, he is enigmatic as he comes in, and then is only mentioned in passing in latter parts of the work. Now, he always stood out to me because he is immune to the Ring of Power and seems to be completely disconnected and carefree about the entire story. So when you read Lord of the Rings, the character seems to be outside of the entire dynamic of the story. And as a reader, you think, well, maybe he is delusional, but the feeling remains that the elves find him to be confusingly mysterious, and Gandalf thinks he is powerful and also enigmatic, so that the character remains in a very special spot, even though he is quickly sidelined in the story. So that's the backdrop for this book. Now, this book is actually prior to Lord of the Rings, and it seems to be the original framework from which a lot of Tolkien's experimentation and exploration was manifested, and from which stemmed the Lord of the Rings. So it is a book of verse, and as a book of verse, it is whimsical and beautiful in the way it is structured. But the reader must remember this is actually prior to Lord of the Rings, but it's the prototype. Now, the verses explore all the more telluric elements of Tolkien's thought and a genesis of his myth-making. So you can see that the basic underpinnings of the entire universe that is Lord of the Rings really lies on a naturalism that Tolkien clearly believed in. He had a green agenda, politically speaking, and to clarify, a green agenda of the time, because the whole concept of a green agenda actually did change with time. So it meant something very different at the time than now. I would say the green agenda of the time was a more primitivist, naturalist point of view, whereas today it is more focused on climate change and human impact on climate, etc. Although there's a core value that is similar, there is a difference in focus. Now, Tom Bombadil within the book clearly stands for a primal universe, a nature that again is whimsical and somewhat unfettered. And he also seems to stand for timelessness. He stands there as a clear representation of how, even within the diverse manifestation of nature, there is also a clear static element to time and space. This is why I have always found Tom Bombadil interesting, because he reminds me of other trickster gods. He seems to be very lighthearted, but at the same time, his carefree nature carries a heaviness due to the fact that everything that surrounds him could be falling apart and he doesn't seem to care. So interestingly, you can have a character that is very lighthearted and sweet, but when there is chaos around it, it makes the character heavier, which reminds me of a character like Krishna, who is also sometimes considered to be some kind of a trickster god. And in the Vedic literature, especially the histories or the Puranas, Krishna is very lightheartedly killing demons and allowing the entire village to be destroyed while he simply doesn't care. Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe, steals his friends and he just replicates them and keeps playing with them. And Brahma is confused because he doesn't understand why everything seems to be the same, and the reason is because Lord Krishna just replicated his friends and kept going. And plenty of other stories in which Krishna as a child kills two demons or liberates two demons, depends how you see it, because when he kills demons, he actually liberates them. But again, he does it in a whimsical, carefree manner. So I do think that categorizes him as a trickster, and Tom Bombadil has a little bit of this within him as well. Now, many scholars believe that Tom was left unfinished by Tolkien, and whether or not this was purposeful is a topic of debate, but obviously by leaving the character unfinished, it actually increases his strangeness, his mysterious nature, and not only is he unfinished within these works, but even the characters around him seem to feel the same way. It's almost as if the characters within the story are aware that they have in their midst an unfinished character. And by trying to figure him out, it elevates his personality. And obviously, the way he dresses is also very funny because it enhances his strange nature, because he's not dressing up in dark clothing or anything like this, but he's actually dressed up in bright clothing in a somewhat ridiculous fashion. And I think that actually elevates the character to add to this element I was referencing earlier. Now, my theory is that he is actually part of the first music, that he is an Ainur that represent nature itself. Now, it's just a theory because this is not very clear, and of course I'm not the only one that has ever come up with this idea. There are plenty of scholars and plenty of fans that have a similar idea, and not only this one, they have other alternative identity possibilities. But I feel pretty confident that this is probably the intention, or at least he fits it very well. And thus, his presence in the story is a reminder of the pristine world of Eden before the fall, before Melkor. So he is an organic, original entity that predates the fall, and therefore he is beyond the concerns of a fallen world. We can't forget that Tolkien was a very fervent, devout Catholic. And as a devout Catholic, a pre-Vatican II Catholic to be precise, the way he saw nature and reality itself was very in tune with that mood. So the pre-fall nature of things is a crucial viewpoint, and in his particular political perspective, it is the aspiration of all living beings to return to that state. Now, keep in mind that there is quite a difference in viewpoint when it comes to the Christian Orthodox point of view, which would be the Eastern view, and the Western Catholic view on the nature of Eden. Because in the East, before the fall, there was no death, there was no conflict, etc. So nature itself changed in the fall. Whereas in the West, nature was pretty much the same when it comes to its intrinsic value and nature, but the fall injected sin into the world and brought with it a lot of horrors. Now, if you read Tolkien's books, you will see that he is clearly a Western Catholic. How was the world before the fall and after the fall? It fits, I would say, perfectly into that Catholic point of view. It would be interesting to see if he would have been an Eastern Orthodox, how the same story would have manifested, just because he would have drawn a line between one event and the other that would have changed the entire story. Something to ponder on. Tom's wife, Goldberry, is also quite profound because she represents clearly the changing dynamic of existence. So, a lot of people think she's a primal goddess of the waters, but she's also very sweet and very kind. So, as a goddess of flow and beauty and change associated with the seasons, really complements Tom's somewhat aloof nature. So, a beautiful, beautiful book. I would like to note, because I know a lot of people watching this are going to think that I am ignoring the fact that Tolkien disliked allegory, and all the interpretations I'm providing here seem to be allegorical. So it seems I'm ascribing to Tolkien allegorical intent. And that's not the case. I am aware that Tolkien did not like allegory, but he did believe in applicability. And applicability is different than allegory, because applicability means that he particularly wanted the reader to inject their own life experiences into their interpretations of the characters. Whereas an allegory would require you to accept the particular meaning given to the characters by the author. So it's not the notion that Tolkien didn't like or didn't approve of an interpretive aspect to the reading of his works. It's just that he didn't want people to think that he meant very specific things, because he wanted the reader to ingest the work freely and with a lot of creativity. So in the realm of applicability, my interpretation, your interpretation, is completely acceptable. It fits the author's intent. So I'm not stepping out of those parameters. And this also applies to the difference between myth and symbolism. For Tolkien, myth is superior to symbolism for a similar reason, but myth has a more artistic, literary flair to it. Symbolism also requires a more narrowed down, analytical study of a work, whereas myth, it fits romanticism, the idea of the intuitive nature of art, allowing thus those that engage with his art to generate their own version of it. And I think that's what makes Tolkien special, that he's granting you a freedom in how you understand his work. Most artists want the work to be understood the way they want it to be understood. So we must appreciate Tolkien for that reason as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this very short review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. And I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.